Where would we be without the various products delivered by the men and women in the trucking industry? Healthy Conversations in Trucking podcast is a platform for professional long-haul truck drivers to share their journeys over the road, educating listeners about the trucking industry and lifestyle. Now, let's dive into the conversation on this brand new episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Healthy Conversations in Trucking. I am your co-host, Jonathan, and today we're going to do things a little differently. Today, the guest is the producer, the editor, and the host of the podcast, my wife, Dr. Huntley. Hello, Doc.
Hello, Jonathan.
And how are we doing today?
I feel a little awkward,
You
but
should.
okay.
That's okay. All right, so we're doing this a little differently today because the topic we're going to talk about today are wives or husbands of, female drivers that stay home and or are not on the road. So today, Doc, I would like to talk about some of the things that you experienced when I was on the road and I'm out there doing my thing. So one of the things I would like to talk about is what would be your favorite gift that you would get from a truck stop?
We're going to just go right into it, aren't we? Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. I didn't expect to be in this dynamic. If you remember, when we first got married, you were local. And then it's almost like instantly you were over the road. I felt like, oh, wait a minute, you tricked me.
Yeah, I didn't mean to trick her, but it did happen. I was hauling cars for a local company, and we were just Carolinas and a little bit of Georgia, home every night. And things changed. Opportunities came up that were better for the family and for us. So, I jumped on them. So we went from being home every night to being home every other 3 weeks or so.
Yeah.
So as a wife, how did you adjust to that? We'll get back to the gifts in a little bit.
Well, yeah.
But how did you adjust to that?
Yeah. So I think it definitely connects to how we got to gifts anyway, because it was a hard adjustment for me. It was not anything I wanted. I did not want to be in this sort of what felt like a long distance relationship. I didn't want it at all. And so I was a mixture of in shock. I was angry. And it took me a long time to really settle into what was going on. The one thing I did like is, it definitely it brought you to a higher pay scale than what you were getting locally with cars and hauling cars. And you really loved that work. I mean, I didn't know anyone else that had such joy and was so excited about the work they were doing besides you. So that was really appealing to me. So it helped me to kind of settle into what was going on and I guess kind of compromise. So as you started to really get into these patterns, and I wanted to be supportive of what you doing the work that you enjoy doing, just like I would want you to be supportive of me if I had the opportunity to do some work that I really enjoyed and it wasn't exactly what you thought. I would want your support. So that helped me compromise. And we got to the gifts thing because I was like, part of my complaint was like, we can't have, we don't get to go on date nights regularly, and I don't see you every day, and we don't, I don't get presents and gifts. Like you're home, it's like you're visiting, and then you're back on the road. So I was like, I want presents. I like presents. I like gifts. He's like, and you kept saying, well, I mean, I'm at a truck stop. I don't go to the mall, and, so that was like another argument, but. So I was like, get creative, there's got to be gifts. I just want to be thoughtful. So that was my big thing. I wanted gifts. So then I suddenly started being showered with truck stop gifts.
Now, truck stop gifts are not bad gifts. For a driver, they're very convenient. And, there's a certain truck stop out there that, likes to sell glass ornaments and trinkets and stuff like that.
Yep, I've got one of each.
Yeah, so... I tried to shower with gifts like that because, as a driver, it's important that you got to have a happy home, because if you don't have a happy home, you don't have a happy road, you know?
Yeah.
And everybody knows out there that when your spouse is happy, you're happy. Yeah. So I was trying. So,
So I do have, there were some, believe it or not, there were a lot that were just, I don't know. I laughed because they were like a little too extra tacky, but Well, he come home all smiles. I got you something.
Are you talking about the stuff from New Mexico?
Okay, no, I wasn't thinking about that, but he got me these gifts from New Mexico that he was trying to tell me were really authentic Mexican.
Authentic. It was from The Thing. And anybody who's been out on, I-10 in New Mexico knows where The Thing is.
No, but they was being sold. Like, after a while, I started seeing being sold here locally. I saw people wearing the same thing that was authentic. I'm using
because they exported them out. That's why.
Okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
But I did like it. It's just the authentic part was kind of funny. So there were two things that I really did like. One was, remember when you started buying me the wall calendars?
Yes, I did.
There's a series, and I don't even know the name right now. It doesn't matter, but there's a series of wall calendars that I absolutely love because all the sayings were like for each month were just, they seemed to be perfect. Like they were just speaking to me. It was exactly for me. And this would happen year after year after year. So I have them. I even save them. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the year, I'd save them and I have them in a drawer and I have several years of them. And then it became really hard to find. And then I eventually found a different brand that was kind of good. But that was one thing I loved. My wall calendar, I would look forward to that. And it would hang in my office. I need to, with all our digital stuff, I still like a regular wall calendar in my office. So that was one of my favorites. Another was, you remember when I started my spoon collection?
Yes, I do.
The souvenir spoons. I had an old friend that loved to collect those. And he passed away a few years ago. And I started thinking about that collection. And that was fun because he would bring a souvenir spoon from a new state, like any state that he traveled in. So if he had to make a trip out west, then he would try to hit and bring me a spoon from a state that I didn't already have. So I've got a nice collection. After I got several of those, I bought a nice case for it, and I have a pretty nice collection right now. Our plan is once we retire and start traveling on our own is to get the rest of the spoons from the different states that I don't already have. Yeah,
it was real difficult to get the spoons when you're out in Wyoming and Oregon and stuff like that because, the truck stops out there are not as plentiful as they are over here on the East Coast. So it's a little bit more difficult to find those spoons. But yeah, whenever I found a spoon in a different state, I would make sure I got it. And I would always make this big deal about coming home. Say, hey, I got a present for you. Close your eyes, hold out your hands. And she already knew what it was, but we still went through the rigmarole of it.
Yeah, it is funny because nothing was ever like gift wrapped. So it could be wrapped in almost anything, a bag, some paper towels.
Socks.
Yes. Yeah. But we had, those were fun. Sometimes there was this one little like ornament type thing that was like a glass carving almost in the shape of a rose and like a little mirror on it or something like that. It lasted for a little while, but it's really delicate. It ended up breaking after a couple of years. I had it on my desk for a little while, but that was fun. I think going back a little bit to just adjusting to like being over the road and, I can only speak from the perspective of a wife. That's my role, but I know I can only imagine some of the dynamics for women who are over the road and, if their husband or just thinking about partners in general, when one is home and one's over the road, it's challenging. I did find there were a couple of groups that I tried to connect with other women who were like me. But I didn't really like a lot of those groups. So I just began to settle into focus, like I said earlier, on just trying to support you, what you were doing and really get into what I was working toward for myself. So I remember when you were first over the road, I was also working on my doctorate, and part of me, when I would settle down, I found that I could focus on what I was doing with my research and with my studies and my work and be really focused and go all in on that. And, while you were away and then we began to kind of, sync up a little bit better. Those were the days when I did some different contract work. So my work schedule, I wasn't like working 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. I had contract work. So if I was working on a project, I'd finish. And then I have periods where my work was my study and my research. So it was easier for me to adjust my schedule to your schedule. If I knew you were coming home or you were going to be home for whatever number of days, I could clear out whatever I had going on so that we could spend our time together. And I helped you pack a lot of your food for the truck and just kind of help you eat healthier when you were on the road. And that was a good part of, those early years when you were on the road. It became a little more challenging once I finished my doctorate and then I started working and then I started building a business. Then it was, you just kind of had to find your own food when you were home.
Yeah. Pack
your own stuff. And I guess you got kind of spoiled with that help and then it was just all taken away. But
it was nice for a while. I'll admit it too. So if you were to talk to a wife or a husband that is in a new position like this, that, their spouse had just gotten their CDL and they're all excited. And when you first get your CDL, you got to go with a major carrier unless you really luck up and get with a local company that has you in a regional. But with most of these big companies, you're out for, could be 4 weeks or 6 weeks at a time. What would be your advice to someone who is, new to this game, and to help them cope with, their husband or wife being away for that long?
That's a good question. From my perspective, communication is like absolutely at the top of the list. Like you've got to work on really sharpening your communication skills. And that goes for both parties. Like, from, everybody, and you already probably are aware of your communication strengths and weaknesses, but when you're over the road and you've got that gap, if you don't strengthen your communication, that means being able to explain when you feel a certain way and talk about what's bothering you and not bottling things up is part of it. But then hearing from the other person and really being in tune with them is another part of it. So it doesn't mean that you get to have like these long, lengthy, detailed conversations all the time, but you need to have, your communication has to be really on point. Like if I'm feeling really upset or down or confused or worried about you on the road, I need to be able to communicate that to you. Because if I don't, you're going to hear something in my voice. And then your mind is going to go a million places and try to fill in what you think is going on at home. And you could be playing one scenario in your mind that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm just simply worried, but I need to communicate that to you, and vice versa. If you're the same way, I mean, that communication is like the number one most important thing for, maintaining a relationship with this kind of work situation.
Right. Because as a driver, there's nothing more frustrating than hearing your spouse upset or something going on and you're on the other side of the country and it's going to take you 3 days to get home. Mm-hmm. So I would have to agree with that. Communication on both sides is a very big key point to getting over the hurdle of being over the road. Some of the times you talk about what you like about being a wife of a trucker. Could you give me an example of one thing that you have really enjoyed being the wife of a trucker, where maybe you were in a truck and maybe you got this wild idea that you wanted to get your CDL for something? Can you explain maybe or give an example of that?
Okay, so if I'm going to be really honest, when we first started dating, I remember you being so excited about me going for a ride in your truck. And I was like, I'm not going in that truck. Yeah, this old, I don't know what it was, but it smelled like fuel. And when you got in the cab, and I just thought, I'm not, why am I going to ride with you in this truck? That was definitely in my mind. And you were just so proud and big old smile and you just couldn't wait. But honestly, once I started to, this is when you were local, I take those day trips with you. I started really liking it, and you get to sit up really high and see everything. And it's just like the same world that I travel, the same roads I travel, but from a different view and a different experience. I really fell in love with with the life and the view and the experience from the truck. And then over time, there was a time that I got a chance to go with you out west. I've done it, 2 or 3 times? But I remember the first time we went literally from the East Coast to West Coast. And
yeah, we did a trip from Charleston to San Diego.
Mm-hmm. That was so much fun to me. So when I've interviewed guests on the podcast and they talk about, when I ask, what do you love about, being on the road, and they talk about where they like to go and how being in the wide open country. One of my favorite parts of the country to travel is along, I-10, even in my car, because it's just, there's nothing there. I love the desert. I love the openness, but being in the truck and being out there, that's just, it's hard to put into words. It is.
And I think that's one of the appeals to being a driver. You ask them, what's your favorite thing? And, the consensus is the freedom. I'm looking out the windshield of my office, and I've always said this, as many times as I've been out west or as many times I've been up down the East Coast, I always see something new every day. There's something that, oh my goodness, there was a house there. Oh, wow. Check that out, or the cactus when you're in Arizona, and you've made the comment one time, you get into Texas on 20 and there's tall trees. And by the time you hit I-10 and come out through El Paso, there's nothing out there. It's just flat. So
yeah, I love watching the landform change. But someone else, I can't remember who it was, said to me, she gets a lot of God time. I think it was the couple that we interviewed, but she said she has a lot of God time when she's driving. And I get it, because that's what it felt like for me. I like quiet and I like to be able to connect. And I felt like that's a lot of God time. You get to see and appreciate so much like simple beauty that can be easily overlooked any other time, or you just have to experience it to know. And I'm surprised. I never knew from the early days, my first thought of what it would be like in that truck compared to, by the time I got ready to go across the country with you and how I felt. So I just didn't, that was a lot of fun to me. That was definitely a high point of what I like about being in the truck.
Right. And we've had a couple trips up to North, New York and stuff and back. Hauling the cars up there.
Not as much fun as going out west for me though.
It's more stressful. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more to do up on the East Coast than riding out to the West.
Yeah.
I know you really enjoyed being in the truck, and the first truck she was talking about was I think it was like a 1981 long nose Pete Boyston screw truck from California over on the East Coast. So it was a very old truck. So yeah, the fumes did come up through the cab.
Are you talking about that? Oh, that one that when we were dating?
Yeah, the one you were dating. Yeah. But it was a good truck. It was a good truck.
Yeah, it had like, how many miles on that?
890,000, I think.
I was so surprised. I was like, how are you still driving that? I'm thinking like cars, you get 100,000 miles. It's time to get another car.
Right. Well, we're going to wrap up this podcast here. And the one thing I would like to say to the drivers out here is never, ever, ever take advantage or think that your spouse or loved one is going to be there waiting on you. You've got to put forth the effort to show that, you care about them and you're thinking about them, and they're still the best thing in your world. You got to put forth that effort. And Sean, giving gifts, as corny as they might be, who doesn't like giving gifts? So remember your spouse when you're on the road. Be courteous, and the communication thing is a big part to keeping the spouse happy. And, trucking on the road, you got to be safe. And if everybody at the home is happy and safe, then you're going to be safe on the road. So we would like to thank you for joining in on this episode. And remember to go to our website, click to be a guest, and tell us your experience. Tell us your story. Maybe you guys, husband and wife team out there like the previous one we had, have a similar story that you'd like to share. Be a guest on the podcast. We'd love to have you. Doc, anything else?
No, I think you summed it all up.
Nice all right. Job. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Conversations in Trucking podcast. Learn more or be a guest on a future episode by visiting healthyconversationsinTrucking.com or simply HCITpodcast.com.